actually this incredibly complex, microscopic city, built from crystals, rods, and even little growth lines. So today, let's dive deep and explore the amazing architecture that gives our teeth all that strength.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to tackle this in 4 main parts. First, we'll get into the basic building blocks of enamel. Then, and this is pretty cool, we'll see how it literally records its own growth story. After that, we'll check out nature's brilliant designs for fighting fractures. And finally, we'll explore some of its unique internal pathways, and even its built-in faults.
Okay, first up, Section 1. Let's get right down to the basics. The fundamental building blocks. What is this stuff actually made of? What are the bricks and mortar holding it all together?
So the most basic unit here is something called the enamel rod, or a prism. I want you to picture millions and millions of these super tiny rods all packed together, running from deep inside the enamel right up to the surface. Each one is just a tight bundle of these things called hydroxyapatite crystals, which, by the way, is the same mineral that makes up bone. But here's the wild part. Every single one of these rods is made by one single cell, an ameloblast. Incredible, right?
Now, if you were to slice through these rods and look at them head-on, you'd see this really cool keyhole pattern. See it here? The head of the keyhole, well, that's the main rod. The tail part, that's what we call the interrod enamel surrounding it. And that little line separating them, that's the rod sheath. It's full of protein, which makes it a slightly weaker boundary. And this is super important clinically, because when we do something like acid etching, this is the area we target to create that perfect surface for bonding.
But here's the thing. These rods aren't just neatly stacked like logs, no way. Their direction actually changes depending on where they are in the tooth, and it's all about resisting force. For the most part, they run perpendicular to the layer underneath, the dentin-enamel junction, or DEJ. But look here. See how they start to angle down towards the gum line? And then they're almost horizontal at the very biting edge. But the real magic happens at the cusps, where you do all your heavy chewing. There, they're all tangled up in this complex web, and that's for maximum strength.
Okay, so we've got the building blocks down. Now for Section 2. This is where it gets really interesting, because enamel is basically a biological hard drive. It records its entire life story, and it does it with a series of tiny microscopic lines.
The first entry in this little diary is what we call cross striations. If you look really close at a single rod in this image, you can just make out these faint little lines running across it. Think of these as daily journal entries. Each line represents one single day of enamel formation, about 4 micrometers worth of growth. It's literally a 24-hour clock, etched right into the tooth.
Okay, so if cross striations are the daily entries, then the Striae of Retzius are like the weekly summaries. If we zoom out a bit, you can see them here. They're darker, more obvious lines. These mark a bigger rhythm, a shift in the body's metabolism that happens about every 7 to 10 days. It's just like the growth rings you see on a tree. And where these lines actually reach the surface of the tooth, they sometimes form these tiny little grooves called parenchyma.
Now there's one growth line that's really special. It's called the neonatal line. It's basically a really dark, obvious striae of Retzius, and it marks the huge metabolic stress of being born. You'll find it in all primary teeth and the first permanent molars. It's a crystal clear boundary line. The enamel made before birth is usually a lot stronger and better quality than the enamel made after. Super fascinating stuff, and it's even used in forensics.
All right, Section 3. We know enamel is hard, right? But think about the incredible forces it's under every single day when you chew. How does it not just crack and shatter? Well, it all comes down to some brilliant natural engineering.
One of enamel's cleverest tricks is something called Hunter-Schrager bands. And here's the thing. They aren't actually real structures. It's an optical effect. It's all about how light bounces off those enamel rods because they keep changing direction. When the light hits rods that are cut lengthwise, we see these light bands, the parazones. When it hits rods cut in cross-section, we see dark bands, the diazones. This whole light and dark pattern isn't just for looks. It's an amazing design that acts like a crack stopper, preventing fractures from running straight through the tooth.
So where do you need the absolute most strength on a tooth? Right on the cusps, the chewing surfaces. And that's where we find something called gnarled enamel. The phrase nature's rebar is just perfect for this. Forget about those orderly rods we saw earlier. Here, they're all twisted and tangled up, almost like a chaotic mess. But that mess is what makes it so unbelievably strong and resistant to breaking.
So yeah, this gnarled, intertwined structure is absolutely brilliant for stopping the tooth from splitting when you're biting down hard. But, there's always a trade-off. From a dentist's point of view, that same incredible toughness makes it a real challenge to cut through when they're prepping a cavity for a filling. Okay,
On to our last section. Now we're going to explore some of the other weird features inside enamel, things that aren't really part of the main structure. We're talking about tufts, spindles, and lamellae. Think of them as internal pathways, and in some cases, potential weak spots.
First, let's look at enamel tufts, and they look exactly like their name suggests, like little tufts of grass. You can see them here growing up from the DEJ into about the first third of the enamel. Now these are hypomineralized, which is just a fancy way of saying they have less mineral and more protein. They're a totally normal thing to have, but they can also act like little superhighways for early cavities to spread right along the DEJ.
All right, next up are enamel spindles. These are little club-shaped things, and you'll find them right at the DEJ too. How do they get there? Well, as the enamel is forming, sometimes little bits of the cells from the dentin underneath get trapped. The enamel just hardens right around them. And there's a theory that these spindles might be one reason for tooth sensitivity, acting like tiny direct phone lines for pain signals.
And finally, we've got enamel lamellae. These are basically leaf-like faults, or you could even think of them as tiny cracks. And they can run all the way from the tooth surface deep down towards the DEJ. There are actually 3 types. Type A and B are developmental. They happen before the tooth even comes in. But type C, that's different. Those are stress cracks that form after the tooth is in your mouth, and they get filled up with saliva and whatever else is in there. But here's the bottom line. No matter the type, they are all potential weak points, a perfect doorway for bacteria.
Okay, so let's pull those last 3 together for a quick recap. This summary table is a great way to see the differences between tufts, spindles, and lamellae side by side. The big thing to remember is that while they're all found near the DEJ, they have totally different origins and, more importantly, different clinical significance. They're all potential pathways, either for decay to get in or with spindles for pain signals to get out.
So we've gone on a pretty deep dive, right? From the daily growth lines to the gnarled up rebar at the cusps. It kind of leaves you with one big thought, doesn't it? Now that you know enamel is built with this mind-blowing microarchitecture, a combination of brilliant, strong design and some built-in flaws, how does that change the way you think about its amazing strength and